Welcome back to Better Weeks Ahead, everybody. Thank you so much for choosing to tune back in again. Tonight, I want to talk about vulnerability, getting vulnerable and being vulnerable. And I want to do that because I'm going to argue that vulnerability is the pathway to intimacy. Vulnerability is the pathway to intimacy. If I said to you, what does the word vulnerable mean to you? Or what's the first word that pops into your mind when you hear the word vulnerable or vulnerability? You might say fear, or I'm scared, or hurt, or pain, or wound, or certainly a risk of incurring those things or being subjected to those things. If you said the word wound or wounded, you're not wrong. If I glance back at my notes here, the root of vulnerability comes from the Latin word vulnus, or vulnus in the classical Latin. It comes from the Latin word vulnus, meaning wound, leading to vulnerare, to wound, and vulnerabilis, wounding. So, the core idea of vulnerability is the capacity to be wounded, whether physically or emotional, a state of being open to harm, attack, or injury, which evolved from a literal meaning to a figurative one of emotional defensivelessness. Say that word 5 times fast. I'm going to get some help, quick side, I'm going to get some help with editing so that when I make mistakes and I need to do second and third takes like I've had to do with this video a couple times now, I can edit them. But for now, you're stuck with my crude guerrilla filming. So now that we know what vulnerability means, and we know that it comes from the root word wound, we are right to associate being vulnerable with being hurt. And in fact, if you're like me, there's times in your life where you've been vulnerable, you've opened yourself up, and you've been hurt. And what you've probably learned from that, if you're like me and many other humans, is to not be vulnerable, or only be vulnerable around certain people. If you're someone who's struggled with drugs and alcohol, like I have in the past, then you've learned that drugs and alcohol, for a while at least, are great at obliterating a sense of being vulnerable. And depending on what drugs you're using, you can feel invincible and not vulnerable at all. But again, those drugs, at least in my experience, only work for so long till I could no longer hide my vulnerability. So I'm going to argue that vulnerability is the pathway to intimacy. And I'm going to start by getting vulnerable with you. So what do I mean by that? What do I mean by getting vulnerable, and what do I mean by a pathway to intimacy? Well, I'm going to argue that through getting vulnerable and being vulnerable, this allows us to be honest first and foremost with ourselves, honest with another person. And this is important because I've learned that if I'm not honest about what's going on or how I'm feeling or what I'm thinking, then it means I don't know where I am. And if I don't know where I am, I can't possibly know where I'm going. So I've learned through the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and some wonderful men in my life and some brothers in Christ in my life how to get and be vulnerable. And what I've found in this is a mountain of riches. I'll expand. Through opening up and becoming vulnerable, I have to get honest first. Once I'm honest, I know where I'm at, and I can get a better sense of where I want to be or where I'm going. Then I'm honest, I've got a clear picture of where I'm at, a clear picture of where I'm going. This allows me to get nearer to people and them to myself. If I'm not willing to be vulnerable, I can't let people in, and they can't know what's going on with me, and they can't help me. If I'm not vulnerable and I don't encourage others in my life to be vulnerable, I can't get close to them and I can't help them. So I'm going to share something. I'm going to get vulnerable with you in hopes of allowing you to feel closer to me. I'm also going to do it with the hope of inspiring and motivating you through demonstration, through modeling, that it's possible to get vulnerable. And I'm going to invite you to, even if it's just privately and quietly between yourself and whoever else is there, or God, or whatever you believe in, to just do it in the privacy and safety of your own home. And then when you're ready, to get vulnerable with other people and watch what happens. So here's what I'm vulnerable about. Here's how I'll get vulnerable. I'm 5'9", I wish I was 6'1". I wish I had a stronger jawline. I'm 52, I wish I was 35 again. I've had Parkinson's for about 4 years and I hate it and I wish I didn't have it. I wish I had a wife or at least a girlfriend. I wish I had more money. I wish I had owned my own home. I wish I was more financially stable. I wish I had a bigger chest. I wish I was bigger and stronger and younger and wealthier, right? So those are some things that I wish for or long for or covet or want. And by sharing those things with you with a smile on my face, they don't sting really that bad. In fact, they don't sting at all. As I say that out loud, I can say that honestly, they don't sting at all. Because I've learned to get vulnerable and be honest with the men in my life today. So I'll share this. I'll share this vulnerability. I'm terrified that Better Weeks Ahead is going to be a colossal failure. I'm afraid that nobody's going to want to use me as a life coach, that nobody's going to want to pay me to come speak at their events, and that I'm doomed to running a landscape business, owning and running a landscape business for the rest of my life. Like, I'm terrified of that. So just pause there for a minute. How did it feel to you to hear me say those things? To hear me admit those things to you, the listener, to the whole world, really, where anyone, once I post this, can hear it and use it and exploit it if they want. How did it feel to hear me say those things, confidently and comfortably to you? What came up for you in your own heart and in your own mind? What things do you feel like you're ready to get vulnerable about, or maybe you're already getting vulnerable? So just think about that for a minute. Now I'll transition into some of the riches, some of the wealth that I've gotten. So by being vulnerable in the way that I just was with you, I've allowed a small, select group of men in my life that I trust with my life, literally, trust these guys with my life. Kind of guys that you would trust to drive your sister or niece or girlfriend who'd had too much to drink at a party. You trust this guy to take her home and get her home safely without pulling any funny business. A guy you'd trust to come into your home when you weren't there. A guy that you would trust with your debit card. A guy that you would trust if you were in a survival situation. These are the men in my life today. So what this has allowed me to do is I've been vulnerable with them and they've been vulnerable with me. They know my deepest, darkest secrets, and they're in the best position to harm me because of the things that they know, and I know theirs, right? So we have a mutual knowledge of each other's vulnerabilities, strengths, weaknesses, character defects, whatever you want to call them. And because of our commitment to love and sobriety in Christ, we get to draw out and lift up the best parts of ourselves and help decrease and or ideally eliminate the parts of ourselves that are evil, corrupt, wicked, distorted, that harm us and harm others. And this is an amazing process. It's an amazing process to be a part of. It's really cool to watch a man come in who's maybe new to our group or new in his sobriety, who is terrified. And he's like an injured animal who's been cornered. And he's belligerent and reckless and unpredictable. And slowly, I beg your pardon, slowly over time, we help heal his wounds. We help him, heal his wounds, and he starts to trust the group, and he becomes one of the wolf in the wolf pack, one of the wolves in the wolf pack. And then he's a strong wolf, and he can hunt with us and celebrate with us and howl at the moon with us and cry with us when one of us loses something or one of us is in pain. So it's through this openness and this vulnerability that I've gotten close to other men. It's also helped me, knowing that I can get vulnerable, look deep into the darkest, most diabolical parts of my nature and my heart and my soul and my spirit, and show those to another man and have him help me undo those or unravel them or unpack them and be rid of them. And without that vulnerability, that intimacy doesn't exist and that growth doesn't exist. So I'll even add to that. Vulnerability is the pathway to intimacy, and intimacy is the pathway to growth. Much more, a lot more could be said, I suppose, on vulnerability and intimacy. We'll touch on the romantic. Think of your romantic relationships, past or present. If either you or your partner, your husband or your wife, isn't willing to be vulnerable with you, then how can you be close with that person? How can you have sexual intimacy or emotional intimacy? If you're not honest with your family members and vulnerable with your family members, how can you be close to them? So it can't be overstated how important vulnerability is. Now, you don't want to just run around with your heart on your sleeve, getting open and honest and vulnerable to everybody you meet. That would be foolishness. But if I can encourage you and leave you with one thing, if you don't have people in your life that you can be vulnerable with and cultivate intimacy and experience growth with, I would strongly encourage you to get those people in your life. If you don't know how to do that, if you're feeling stuck, I would strongly encourage you to reach out to me about one-on-one coaching, because I can show you precisely how to do that. I can share with you how I did it and how the men in my life have done it and continue to do it. And I can hold your hand through the most terrifying parts until you see that fear and pride, as the big book says, turn out to be boogeymen. Right? Remember when you were a little kid and you thought there was a monster under your bed or in your closet? Maybe that's how you're feeling right now around your relationships, around intimacy, around closeness. Maybe you're feeling blocked off or walled off or in the dark. It's okay. It's okay to feel that way. I can help you walk out of that. It's been a pleasure doing this video because it's forced me to think of some other things I want to share. It's forced me to question what I'm saying actually and take a closer look at it upon my time of reflection later. And I really hope that it has spoke to or touched someone out there, even if it just touches one person who's struggling. I really hope that I've helped at least one person, and at the very least that I haven't harmed anyone. Thank you so much for tuning in again with me, and I look forward to seeing you on our next chat.